It's time to open the files on Central Intelligence podcast, part of the OK Baseball family, presented by Slasher Sports. We're talking NL Central Baseball. I'm your host, Steve Feck. And the background, you obviously know that I am based here in Pittsburgh, which is one of the reasons why I chose the NL Central. I've been here continuously for 25 years. So of all the divisions, I've probably watched more NL Central baseball than any others. But there are so many sites and all of the MLB related type of, outlets are all big on, the AL East and the NL East and then the Dodgers and the Padres and and that's great and all the big market stuff. But there are a large core of baseball fans, and I'll go as far as to say within the NL Central, I would say three of the most loyal fan bases exist in the NL Central. Of course, that's the St. Louis Cardinals, Chicago Cubs, and the Cincinnati Reds. That's not to knock the Brewers and Pirate fans, but those fan bases go back a long, long way. So we thought here at OK Baseball that we should shine a spotlight, if you will, on the NL Central. Now, I'm glad we didn't start at the beginning of the year because a lot of the melodrama that occurred with some of the teams has already kind of played out, and especially in St. Louis. And we'll get into that over the course of this podcast and others. But, the NL Central cannot be dismissed, it cannot be ignored. Now, for 2023, are we going to get more than one playoff team out of the NL Central? Odds are not. I think there's enough depth in the other two divisions that even a second wild card spot might be difficult to secure. But this is a division that really no longer has the Habs in St. Louis and the Cubs, and then teams in a rebuild. I mean, the Cubs have come out of a rebuild. They're probably a couple of steps ahead of the Pirates, who have came out of what seems like a rebuild for 30 or 40 years. But in essence, since Ben Sherrington's been on board in Pittsburgh, they've made significant strides to be competitive again. And even the Reds, who were all in for a little while, and then they fell back, got rid of their general manager, Dick Williams, came in with a new front office. And they've been drafting really, really well. So we're looking at potentially in 2024, we're probably looking at four legitimate teams that can contend for a wild card spot. And by 2025, all five of the teams are going to be part of the conversation. So here in 2023, we're going to start really focusing on the NL Central here at Central Intelligence. And let's start with where we are at the magical, mythical 50 game mark. You hear so many front office personnel and so many broadcast analysts and so many managers and general managers just giving, just mouthing the words, well, we want to wait about 50 games to see what we really have. And I don't know that that's really accurate. It's more at the 50 game mark, you know what you don't have and what you need to go out and get. That's really what we're talking about the 50 game mark. I think it buys teams that might be, on their way up, buys them some time to weed out some of the veteran players, start bringing in, rookies and their top prospects. I think in this division, you look at the Cincinnati Reds, they've done a terrific job this year bringing in young players. I was watching them really just dismantle the Cardinals before I came on here and record. And I mean, they're hitting the ball. Matt McClain is just amazing. We'll talk about him in detail when we kind of decide what each team should be doing at the 50 game mark. I understand that front offices don't want to overreact. I understand that, the game is cyclical, but, I'm not an analytics guy. So if you're looking for a podcast that's going to break down analytics and everything, this might not be it for you. But I really think we can take a look, and that's what's great about a division like the NL Central. You can look at it based on what their performances are, and you can see incremental improvements, incremental fallbacks. So really, this is an ideal division to talk about on a weekly basis, which we'll do here on OK Baseball. I want to look at not only what their records are right now, I want to take a look at the Pythagorean records, or Pythagorean win percentage, I think is the new fancy terminology for it. Really, what it is, it's basically based on run differential, runs scored, runs allowed. There are some adjustments that are made, but unlike so many of the weighted analytics and the expected analytics and anything with a plus at the end, they're not trying to bring everything to a mean. In other words, saying it doesn't matter that you're hitting at Wrigley Field in the summer with the wind blowing out, or whether you're at Riverfront. I still call it Riverfront. That's it. Or whether you're at Great American Ballpark, which is a very good hitting environment. They kind of, will say, okay, you did this, but we're going to sort of detract from that because not all ballparks are like that. The bottom line is it's a box score. You have a winner, you have a loser. There are results, there are a number of hits, number of at-bats, number of RBIs, stolen bases. So ultimately, that's why the Pythagorean winning percentage gives you a look at a team, and it's not predictive. It's not saying this is what the team is going to do, like so many analytics get into that sort of gray shrouded area of, oh, what this player could. That's fine in the offseason, but once the first pitch of the season happens, analytics really don't serve a purpose other than giving you an idea of how some players might match up against, other teams, players at the same positions. And even that is a little bit jaded, but I don't want to get into a discourse on analytics here. Pythagorean win percentage is basically, it's more indicative of what a team could do or should be doing based on the results that the players on their rosters are producing. So if you look at the Central Division, Milwaukee Brewers are up by one game on the Pittsburgh Pirates. Actually, it's 2 games after today because Pittsburgh lost to Texas. I would think that the Cubs should be pretty far ahead of the Mets at this point. So we're going to give them the win on that. So we're going to call them 22-26. Cardinals are 22-29. By percentage points tonight, the Cardinals are in last place in the NL Central. Cincinnati put a hurting on them. I didn't see the final score before we started the record here. So that's what we're looking at standing-wise. But going into today's games, the Cubs' winning percentage was .447. Their Pythagorean winning percentage was .555. So when I say it's indicative, okay, they're scoring a lot of runs. They're not as effective kind of holding opponents' run production down. There's still some work to be done in the pitching staff. But that's showing you that even with the Cubs hitting the way they are, technically with some of the run differentials that have been put up, they technically could be even better. So that's why I like to look at the record and the Pythagorean win percentage to give an indication of what could be in store or what this team is really all about. The Reds were at .417. They're almost right on par. I think the Pythagorean win percentage was .418. So the Reds are what they are. The Reds are in the process of bringing up their top prospects, people they've been grooming for a while, and moving them up the ladder and into the lineup and saying, we think you're ready, and show us that you're ready. So the Reds are what they are. The Brewers They have a 542 winning percentage going into today. According to the Pythagorean win percentage, which again is runs scored, runs allowed, run differential is the main ingredient there. They should be below 500. They had a 487 Pythagorean win percentage. So that's telling you the Milwaukee Brewers do all the little things right to win ball games. The Pirates, one of the biggest surprises, and I live in Pittsburgh, so I pretty much watch all of their games or listen to all of their games, and certainly inundated with information locally by broadcast crews and podcasters and fans. They're about where they should be. It's almost like with the Reds. They are what they are. And that's a big surprise to a lot of people. And we'll talk a little bit later about the Pirates. Don't be as surprised. I mean, that you shouldn't be as surprised by their performances. Are they going to keep it up? We'll talk about that later. I think that'll be difficult to do. But the Pirates are for real at this stage. As we head into past the 50-game mark, head into Memorial Day weekend, which has always been the traditional milepost to go ahead and try to figure out who it is that could be winning a division or making the playoffs and who could not. And then we have the Cardinals. One of the biggest mysteries of this season, though admittedly, I wasn't buying into all the hype about the Cardinals in the offseason. According to their run differential, their Pythagorean winning percentage is 537, and they have a 440 winning percentage. The Cardinals are in a heap of trouble unless they get active on the market really quick right away. They're not going to solve their problems just by, it'll work out. Okay, that's not going to happen. The Cardinals are in a heap of trouble, and that gives teams like the Pirates and the Cubs hope that they can hang in there. And if the Brewers keep having the rash of injuries that have been happening to their pitchers, especially their top pitchers, it gives these teams that have been off to a pretty decent start a little bit of hope going into the summer months and into September. Another indicator when you look at here at the 50-game mark that any front office personnel, any manager, even players on the roster need to look at is what are we doing within the division? Especially now in the day of the balanced schedule. I cannot tell you how outraged I have been, starting when it was coming up in the CBA negotiations, working all the way through. This is bad for baseball. It'll be nice for like a year or two, I guess. You know, not everybody can afford an MLB TV subscription. Not everybody has the chance to travel to see games. So having teams on their TV, on their radio, getting a chance to go see these players in person, these teams in person. Okay, I mean, it has a novelty effect to that. I thought interleague play was just fine. They could have expanded a little bit on there, where in essence, rather than having, the premier teams and the premier markets like the Cubs and the White Sox, the Cardinals and Royals, all of those type of competitions, you could have expanded it out a little bit more. That'd have been fine. But to take away 5 games against each of your division opponents, so you're losing 20 chances, 20 games to make up ground if you falter early, to kind of even the score if one of the teams is kind of has your number the first series of the year, you have a chance to kind of make up those games. I have a big theory that when you're playing a divisional game, in essence, there's a factor of 2. You win and you're adding a loss to the other team. Now that's not necessarily mathematically sound. Those of you watching on our YouTube channel, if you look at me, obviously I am not a rocket scientist, but it's a reality. It's a practical reality of baseball. When you look at the fact that if you beat a team in your division, you're gaining a game on them and you're pushing them back a game by giving them the loss. So for the Cardinals, who have struggled out of the gate early, they're not going to get a chance to make up as much ground against teams as some of the other teams in the division. In fact, the Cardinals are the only team in the division that has played each of the other four teams at least one series. There are some teams that haven't played two teams in the division for the series. So divisionally, you look at the Cubs, they're 3-5. They haven't played the Pirates yet, but they're 3-5 in the division. So that pretty much matches up to their record for the most part. The Reds, they're 4-7. They had some problems with the Pirates, a team that generally they have been able to handle pretty well over the previous years, even as both teams were struggling. The Brewers are 5-4 in the division. They have not played the Reds. They have not played the Pirates yet. The Pirates are 7-4 in the Central. And that's a big deal. Okay, you can say, well, yeah, they beat up on the Reds. Well, it doesn't matter. They had the Reds on their schedule, and they won those games. So that's another advantage the Pirates have as we go forward. They already have a higher winning percentage against teams in their division than anybody else. I mean, the Cardinals are 8-7. They have played every team in the division at least once. So that has kind of helped them take some of the sting out of their performance early in the season. But really, it's not enough of a difference where, in essence, they're just in the mix in the NL Central. They're not taking advantage of the bad division that everybody labels the NL Central as. That's what makes this such an intriguing division to follow, especially this year. Every team has a legitimate chance to say, if we do this or we do that, we can stay in this. And ultimately, really, in 2023 for the NL Central, it's a one playoff spot division. But every team is flawed enough that they could very well find themselves out of the divisional race. And some of these up-and-coming teams could jump in there. So let's take a real quick look at all five teams in the NL Central. This is the Central Intelligence Podcast, the premier episode of the Central Intelligence Podcast. I am your host, Steve Feck. This is part of the OK Baseball podcast family, and it is presented by Slasher Sports. We're going to go alphabetically. So we'll start with the Cubs. And the Cubs can hit. Offensively, they are fourth in team batting average, first in on-base percentage, fifth in slugging, and fourth in OPS in the National League. That's pretty good. Okay, for a team that entered the night 5 games under 500, though, I believe by the time you're watching this, the Cubs will be now 4 games under 500. They've got a great lineup. Ian Happ, Dansby Swanson, Seiya Suzuki, they're all locked up. They're terrific. Cody Bellinger is having a resurgent year. They have young guys like Morel and Wisdom. They're producing consistently. Morel is out of his mind, 9 homers in the 12 games since he's been called back up. They're giving Mervis an everyday opportunity at first base. They let go. They DFA'd Eric Hosmer. So the Cubs, have a lineup that you have to be concerned about every day. I think they need to solidify their pitching, especially in the bullpen, but even the rotation. I mean, I think Jacob Steele seems like a legit top 1-2 guy of in a rotation. Wineski has found some consistency now. He's only 25. Marcus Stroman is so underrated. He just pitched some marvelous ball games this year. And then as we were recording this, I had to walk away. Stroman was still throwing in the eighth inning against the Cardinals. You know, I'm sorry, not against the Cardinals, against the Mets. He was in the eighth inning, so kind of getting revenge against his former team. The bullpen could use a youth infusion. I don't know how many of their young arms would really be poised to take leverage situations yet in a major league bullpen. But what do they have to lose at this point? Their offense has been so efficient that, from a pitching standpoint, maybe you look at guys on your 40-man roster like Javier Assad or Caleb Killian. Again, can they come in and start every fifth day or whatever? No, but maybe you can get some innings, after the trade deadline, after things start to settle out. If you're not really in divisional contention, I think that you can start bringing up some of your younger arms. But at the trade deadline, if the Cubs front office if Jed Hoyer can do a good job, I think that he can solidify that 33.5% chance that the sports books have for them to make the playoffs. But honestly, it's hard for me to imagine the Cubs staying in the running for a wild card spot come September. Here at the 50-game poll, where everybody always says this is when teams really know what they have and what they need. I think the Cubs need too much to really win the division this year. But if they keep hitting the way they do and they get some pitching, it could be interesting. So Cub fans, have some heart. I know you've been frustrated. You saw a lot of your stars go out the door. But I think things are going to look up here, and I'm really fascinated to see where they are at the trade deadline as far as a record, as far as contention. They certainly have the payroll room to go out and make some additions, and I think if they can solidify their pitching, who knows what's going to happen down the stretch. The team that I'm really interested in watching this year is the Cincinnati Reds. Now, they've only been giving a 0.3% chance at snagging a playoff spot. But you can count me in once the odds for 2024 come out. I might lay some money and could possibly reap some benefits. I really think that they are going to be a legitimate playoff contender in 2024. Their youth movement is in full bloom. There's no more Moustakas. There's no more, Jesse Winker. All of the guys that we remember. I mean, Joey Votto will be gone after this year if he comes back from injury this year. They're not in the depths of a rebuild as they've been painted. Okay, are they technically in last place? They were coming into this evening, the night that we're recording this podcast, but they're not in the depths of a rebuild. They're coming out of the rebuild, and they're giving legitimate opportunities to their young players, and they are flashing signs of stardom. Bringing up Matt McClain was a stroke of genius. Watching him and playing college ball at UCLA, you could see then that he had all-star potential. And he is swinging the bat with confidence and with power. He is not afraid. He's not being overmatched. They've been trying to pitch him, up high in the strike zone, 97, 98, 99. The game I was watching him against the Cardinals, it was just so impressive. He is not intimidated, and he can pick it at shortstop. So you couple him with Jonathan India. Nick Senzel is finally showing signs of his potential that will play out here at the major league level. I think the most underrated guy in the roster is TJ Friedel, he just came back off the injured list on this past Tuesday. He's hitting over 310. You've got Steer, you've got Fraley. These are guys that can hit the ball, and they're hitting in a favorable environment at Great American Ballpark. You look at their pitching staff, that's what's going to maybe cause some frustration for Reds fans and maybe hold them back this year. I mean, Willie Green lights up radar guns. I mean, this kid throws hard, and he knows what he wants to do on the mound. With every start, he learns more about being a pitcher, not just a thrower. He's only going to get better this year. And the few times that I've seen him pitch, he looks like a guy that's gaining confidence and is going to just be a superstar, on this roster. People will start to forget about Luis Castillo and focus on Willie Green. Brandon Williamson has just arrived, and I think he should stay up all summer. I mean, his second start was not as impressive as his first, but I mean, he obviously has major league stuff. He knows how to get hitters out. He's going to have his lumps. He's going to have his bad outings, as every young pitcher pretty much does. But you couple like Green and guy like Williamson, Lodolo, when he comes back off the IL, he should continue to make strides. I mean, I've really been impressed over the last 2 years. I'm not as thrilled with Ashcroft. I mean, again, he has his moments, perhaps in his development, but he's at the age that he should already be there. But you've got the makings of a contending staff, and you have a bullpen anchored by Alexis Diaz. That's going to help a young team win close games. And when you win close games, and games that you should win because you're ahead going into the 7th and 8th innings, you're going to gain confidence in yourself. So I say just keep the floodgates open for prospects as the season progresses there in Cincinnati. You use 2023 as a springboard for 2024 and beyond. The Reds are going to be, if injuries don't become a factor and they manage things properly and they keep drafting well, they're going to be a force. It's not going to be far off. Personally, if the Reds wise up and replace David Bell at the end of the year, I mean, David Bell is, I'm sorry, I'm sure he's great with the kids. He's got his players back. I mean, I really question some of his in-game decision-making. But I think if they replace David Bell and they bring in a manager that can relate to young players and get the most out of them, I think the Reds could develop into a wild card contender next year. I really, really do. 2025 might be more realistic, but I think the Reds, there's something to be worried about. If you're a fan of National League Baseball, if you're a National League team, you need to watch what the Reds are doing this year, especially their young players. Which brings us to the Milwaukee Brewers. Now, I host a podcast for another site that covers the Blue Jays, and every March I do a prediction show. This year I compared the top 10 World Series favorites according to multiple sports books. And on that podcast, I made it clear there were two glaring omissions: the Tampa Bay Rays and the Milwaukee Brewers. Both teams thus far have proven me wiser than I look. But the fact is, the Brewers lead the NL Central despite their rotation being wiped out at times by injuries. And as I mentioned earlier, their Pythagorean winning percentage should have them below 500. But, they're at 550. It's a testament to in-game managing. And Craig Counsell may very well be, if not the best, one of the top 3 in-game managers in Major League Baseball right now. And he gets his team to not only understand what their roles are, but gives them the confidence to come up big when the moment requires. I can't really say at this point that there is a superstar on this team, though I think Willie Adames could very well develop into that role. But there are players, people cast offs, role players like Rowdy Tellez and Owen Miller, Brian Anderson. Yeah, Christian Yelich has been healthier. He's missed some time with his back issues. Again, it's going to always be an issue. But they're smacking the ball all over the place, especially with runners on base. The Brewers are making the most out of the opportunities that either their opponents give them or when they're having good pitching performances that their pitchers give them. They had a second consecutive shutout against the Houston Astros to win that series on this Wednesday as we record this podcast. The Brewers, are for real. And their young center fielder, Joey Weimer, he's gaining confidence. He's barely above the Mendoza line, but he swings with authority. He's got some good pop. He's a good defender. It's not going to be very long before he really explodes onto the scene. And he very well could be the factor in the Milwaukee Brewers winning the NL Central. When you factor in all the other things, if Joey Weimer can tap into his potential and consistently contribute, I think the Brewers can actually pull away. Pitching-wise, they're going to have to get creative. I think they're going to have to kind of fish the rosters of teams that already kind of know that they're out. Corbin Burns and Freddie Peralta is the top of the rotation. They're going to win games. They're going to be dominant, but they need to stay healthy. And then you have big-time arms like Woodruff and Lauer, that are out and don't know when Woodruff won't be back. Lauer, we're not sure. And they have just a lights-out bullpen. Devin Williams is probably more dominant as he has ever been. Bryce Williams and Joe Payamps, other cast-offs from other organizations, have come in and have done a great job. They need to add to the rotation depth. If they want to solidify themselves as the team that everybody else is going to have to catch, I think they're going to have to add to the rotation depth, add to their bullpen, maybe go bring back a Brent Suter, who's having a wonderful year in Colorado and in relatively obscurity. He's having a terrific year. They love him in that clubhouse. Bring him back. Bring him back in there at the trade deadline or before. I'm sure the Rockies are going to hold out to the deadline rather than letting them go. But those kind of arms, bring them in so that Council can mix and match. And if any team can pull away in this division, it is the Milwaukee Brewers. And in the past, the front office has not hesitated to strike early. Willie Adames was an early season trade a couple of years ago, for example. They will go out and they'll make deals. They're not afraid. They don't. I'm not even sure they believe in the 50 game. Let's wait to see what we have kind of deal. I think they've had to be scrambling to find replacements for injured players, but eventually they're going to have to be aggressive in the market. I think Matt Arnold's the kind of general manager that you want in that situation. So the Brewers, for me, I think they were way underrated. And not a lot of people had faith in what this team could do. And they have really showed exactly what they can do. The Pythagorean records don't always show what a team is made of. And I think that the Milwaukee Brewers have made it clear that they are going to be in this race right down to the final week, if not the final day of the season. And we have our Pittsburgh Pirates. Pirates having a winning record. Not sure how much longer they'll have a winning record, to be honest. I see them on a daily basis. I don't really have a horse in this discussion here, but if there's a team that I'm most familiar with, it would be the Pirates because I live here in Pittsburgh. But this is a team that is starting to believe in themselves. There's a lot of young players that are getting regular at bats and regular innings. They have a Rule 5 kid, named Rodriguez. He's been just unbelievable anytime they put him in the bullpen. And they have a legit bullpen. They've got David Bednar. He's not going anywhere. And his name always shows up when people are talking about who's going to get traded at the deadline. Ben Cherington is done moving salaries or moving players at the deadline to add to organizational depth. He has that organizational depth. He is doing perhaps an even better job here in Pittsburgh than he did rebuilding the Red Sox through the draft, through trades, into a World Series champion. And in all honesty, the year that Dave Dombrowski was at the helm and won in Boston, that was Ben Cherington's prospects that all came up and won that World Championship. Yes, O'Neill Cruz is down. But, Tacopino Marcano, he's making a legitimate claim on being the shortstop next year. And then the Pirates can move Cruz somewhere like I think they would like to. I think, a 6'7" shortstop, it can work. He's so athletic. But perhaps to save him, because he's such an aggressive player, maybe move him to the outfield. Move him to second. They have some veterans in there now, kind of filling holes like Rich Hill and Carlos Santana. There's talent available that they're going to be able to bring up. They've locked up Brian Hales a long time. They've locked up Brian Reynolds. And they did the one thing they had to do this year that I think more than anything has those players believing that the Pirates are no longer the Pirates of the multiple jokes and punchlines of the last 20 years. They brought back Andrew McCutchen. Andrew McCutchen is not the Andrew McCutchen that won an MVP. He still draws walks, gets on base. He's always upbeat, always positive. He's teaching these kids how to be major league players. Do I believe the Pirates are going to be there come August or September? I really don't. I think they'll flirt with 500 the entire season, but I don't know that they're going to be in the race. But this is another team like we talked about with the Reds. Come 2024, teams aren't going to laugh them off anymore or overlook them. They're going to have to be taken seriously. So the Pirates are playing about what their Pythagorean win percentage says they should be. I think it's going to come down to their pitching. Will the Pirates be big buyers? No. I think they'll be sellers, but they're going to sell guys like Rich Hill and Carlos Santana, guys that don't necessarily have a future for a contending Pirates teams in the future. So they're going to get some more bits and pieces. Maybe it won't be top prospects. They're going to get bit role players. They're going to be able to help them now and in the future. And that leaves us with the St. Louis Cardinals. I only need 3 letters to describe the Cardinals' first 50 games. WTF. Everybody talks about the Cardinal way and their commitment to excellence and the way they develop players. And they do have some wonderful hitters coming up through the system, and they produced a couple of nice pitchers. But these are not the Cardinals that their fans, and by far the most knowledgeable baseball city in North America is St. Louis. Their fans aren't used to this Yankee Bronx Zoo kind of stuff that's going on. They are paying the price now for letting Mike Schilt leave. Well, they forced him out, really. I shouldn't say they let him leave. They forced him out. Marvel is he's not ready. He's overwhelmed. He is a deer in the headlights. Every game I have watched the Cardinals, and I have probably watched either as a condensed game or 4 or 5 innings of, I would say, 25 Cardinal games this year. He's just not the man for the job. Not with a team this talented. Now, again, they are 12-7 this month so far in May. Well, 12-8 because they lost to the Reds as we record this. But much of that improvement is attributed to the lineup coming alive. When you've got Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado and Edman and Gorman and Nootbaar in the lineup most days, you're going to score a bunch of runs. And I think that's why that their Pythagorean win percentage is so high. It was 537. It's the highest in the division. It's that high because they have games where their offense just beats and hits their way to a win. They're doing a horrible job preventing runs. And there's so much going on in the clubhouse and with the roster decisions. I mean, Jordan Walker, I think he demonstrated that he doesn't have anything else to prove in the minor leagues. The minute he had a difficult stretch, he was out. Back down to the minors. Now, he'll be back up before the All-Star break, I would imagine. But it's another sign of an organization pushing the panic button. And that panic button is being used a lot with the Cardinals these days. The pitching staff is abysmal. The bullpen is a joke. We hear about the crazy outfield depth the team has at all levels of the organization. Well, you know what? Time has come to stop talking about it and move some of those pieces. Bring up the younger players if need be, move some veterans to get some arms that are going to do something. Adam Wainwright, love him as a competitor. His time has passed. You can't count on Steven Matz. I think Miles Nicholas has been a riddle as to what you're going to get from him, whatever that it may. And last time I checked, the most outfielders you could play in a game is 4. And that's if you play one of them in the DH slot. So you don't need all these outfielders. You need to be aggressive now. If you want to get back in this race and be considered a legitimate contender, John Mozeliak, you need to be aggressive and piece together deals for starting, pitching, and bullpen arms. You know, they've scored 254 runs going into this Wednesday's game. So that's second in the National League behind the Dodgers. But it's teams like the Rockies and the Angels and even the Yankees, to many extents, it's great. If you can't prevent runs, you're just spinning your wheels. You're not going to go anywhere. St. Louis is still posted at a 69.3% chance of making the playoffs. If they can't bolster their rotation, that seems very optimistic to me. And personally, if Marmol is still in the dugout and in the clubhouse come the All-Star break or the trade deadline, then I think you can forget about a division title altogether. I think this is just one of those years. The Cardinals they need to, on the fly, try to make up for some of the questionable decisions they have made over the last couple of years. So what say you? Please do leave your comments on our YouTube channel. We appreciate you tuning in to this misadventure of Central Intelligence. We're taking a look every week at the National League Central. Will give you news, transactions. We're not going to be maybe as in deep dive analysis as we were here tonight with the whole division, as a whole. But we want to bring attention to the most overlooked division in baseball. That's the National League Central. You can come to Central Intelligence, and we'll help you go through the files and make up your own mind to see exactly what's going on in the division. Thanks again to OK Baseball and Slasher Sports for letting me sit here and talk with you, talk baseball, talk National Central Baseball. I'm Steve Feck. We'll talk to you next week.